What's good, YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're changing things up. We're going to be going over all the cards, or a good amount of the cards, that I feel are really underpointed in Genesys format, primarily targeting around floodgates. But starting off here, we have Macrocosmos. It was first printed in 2006. I don't think I need to really go into detail too much about the card. While it's face up on the field, it has the continuous effect to send any card or any card that would be sent to the graveyard is banished instead. I don't know how Konami feels about these banished floodgates. In my opinion, they're not fun for the game. They brought them back kind of around Tearlament format, thinking that would be a good way to counter Tearlaments, but realistically in Genesys format, I don't think that they're that healthy. We can go ahead and point these. Now, this is a little bit better of a card compared to Dimensional Fissure, but if we're comparing floodgates, I don't know what we're doing here. It also now has a Searcher and Chaos Distill, which was recently printed, but I don't imagine anybody here is playing Helios the Primordial Sun. I think they're playing the Primordial Stun. So I would say that realistically, this card needs to be pointed. I wouldn't have as much of an issue with it if all it did was make you lose resources by banishing the cards instead of them going to the graveyard. The graveyard is a second hand, and so, losing access to that I think could be interesting gameplay. However, it does just completely stop some cards from even functioning and being able to activate at all. And that's where I kind of draw the line at some of these cards like Macrocosmos. Speaking of cards that don't let you play the game, Gravekeeper's Inscription. It has 3 different floodgate effects, and it's a lingering effect. So neither player can activate card effects in the grave, neither player can banish cards from the grave, or neither player can special summon monsters from the grave. Now, we already pointed Abyss Dweller to 100 points for this, not being able to activate cards in the grave. So this should just be 100 points. Right now, the fact that any deck that doesn't really utilize the graveyard that much can go ahead and play Gravekeeper's Inscription to completely flood out their opponents, I really think this card needs to be pointed and out of this, personally. Now, it did just get its first reprint in Battles of Legend Glorious Gallery since, 2024, but just get it out of this format. Continuing on with more cards that don't let you special summon from the grave and are lingering effects. Number 68, Santa Fe Sky Prison. It's not a new card. Its last printing was 6 years ago. We can, I think, point this to 100 points as well. Or if Konami wants to be funny, they can go ahead and point it to 68 points. I don't care. But just having this on a rank 8 body, letting people, floodgate people out from special summoning from the grave, I don't think it's healthy for the game and should be taken out back. Next, this is kind of my Tyrant's Tantrum. So Konami back in 2011 thought it would be a really good idea to print a bunch of these Tyrants cards. Now, they did already point one of them, so they clearly know that some of these cards are a problem and don't present the most fun gameplay experience. Right now I have Tantrum pulled up because, at the cost of tributing 2 monsters, you make it so where your opponent has, in order to activate a spell card, they must be able to send 1 spell card from their deck to the graveyard. That sounds really bad as a floodgate. However, with cards like Macrocosmos and some other cards we'll see in the future, you can stop your opponent from being able to send a spell card from their deck to the grave, functionally preventing them from activating any spell cards, and now you have a one-sided Imperial Order face up. So I think this should just be 100 points, even if it's not seeing play now. Get it out of here. And I don't think necessarily that a card has to see play in order for them to point it out of the system. So I think Tyrant's Tantrum is a perfect example of that. It was printed 15 years ago. Nobody's going to miss it if it goes now. Then we get to Tyrant's Tirade. I think this is the one that is already pointed. You just tribute 2 monsters. You prevent people from activating monster effects in the hand or on the field. So obviously preventing people from being able to activate effects is an important thing that we want to point out of this game. So let's continue on. Tyrant's Throws, kind of similar. You tribute 2 normal monsters, except tokens, so obviously a little bit steeper of a requirement, but it has the effect on there. Neither player can normal or special summon effect monsters. Let's get it 100 points. Let's get it out of here. Continuing on, we get to Tyrant's Temper. You tribute 1 monster to activate it, and then all face-up monsters on the field that you own are unaffected by other trap cards. This one, it doesn't necessarily have to be pointed. You're just making stuff unaffected by other traps. I think realistically that's probably fair, but it's a Tyrant card, so maybe we point it too. Last card, probably the funniest one of all the Tyrants, Tyrant's Tummy Ache. You activate it by tributing one monster, and then neither player can special summon level 6 or higher monsters. That is interesting. I wonder if they know that there's a typo there. Can special summon a level 6 or higher monster. Anyway, if you have 3 or more cards in your hand, destroy this card. So obviously, there's some way to play around it, because you can make your opponent have 3 or more cards in their hand, but it's effectively a floodgate for a lot of synchro and fusion strategies. Let's get it out of there as well. Speaking of not letting you summon monsters, this is going to be a little bit more of a theme here. You have Newman, Eret, Testudo. Neither player can special summon monsters with 1800 or less attack. Obviously, this floodgates out very specific decks, and it's a level 5. But you're locking people out of the game. It needs points on it. It was last printed 14 years ago. I think it would be fine to get it out of the Genesys format. Then we get to its brother, Testudo Eret Newman, where it's the inverse. Neither player can special summon monsters with 1800 or more attack. Also, funnily enough, 1800 defense. So how are you supposed to even attack over it to clear it? So get this one out of here as well. Guard Dog, flip. Your opponent cannot special summon for the rest of this turn. They like printing random flip support. I don't know why we would want one that just stops your opponent from special summoning, so let's get this to 100 points as well. Poisonous Winds, when monsters cannot be special summoned. That's it. So let's go ahead and get this one out. Non-fusion area. I just lost one of my final matches in a regional thanks to this card, so I'm especially salty about non-fusion area. I've lost a couple of different matches to this card. It's D barrier for a specific type, so I wouldn't mind if this went up to 100 points. Soundproofed, same thing except for synchro monsters. However, this is applying the lingering effect until the opponent's next turn. So in some ways, it's even worse than a card like non-fusion area. Worse as in it's worse to go against. Discord, just like non-fusion area, neither player can synchro summon. Let's get this up to 100. First printed in 2009 too. Like nobody's going to miss these cards being put out of the game. It's insane to me what they were thinking during the synchro format, printing all of these floodgates. Eye of Truth. This one, I'm not 100% certain on. So your opponent must keep their hand revealed. Now, obviously, it does have a counter, but the counter never justifies the floodgate. But some cards just reveal for cost, and I almost feel like it should just be like a rule change that you can reveal a card already revealed. This to me feels like the most one that it shouldn't really be a floodgate. It's meant for you to see your opponent's hand. So I feel like this could probably be free if they just did a small rule change, but that's just my opinion. Speaking of keeping hands revealed, mutually averred destruction is the same thing. So if they were to point the Eye of Truth, I want them to go ahead and point mutually averred destruction. It's a normal trap, so you can also search for it a lot easier through things like Trap Trick and Trap Tracks, or Trapaholic. So let's disappoint it if we're pointing Eye of Truth. Mask of Restrict. This one, neither player contribute cards. This is just being used as a floodgate. It's not the same as the Eye of Truth. I want this thing out of here. It was last given a printing 8 years ago as like a common in a structure deck. I don't think anybody's going to miss it if this card gets pointed. And then we get to the Ice Barriers. This one might be contentious. But the entire point of the Ice Barrier strategy is to floodgate the opponent. Yes, they have cool big monsters like Trishula, but Trishula does a hand rip, which is equally degenerate as floodgating your opponent. Now, some of the floodgates are really silly and really funny, but some of them, it is just nearly impossible to play against, especially once they've established enough of them. I am almost okay if we want to point these in a way where Ice Barrier, the deck, is still playable, but like you only get one floodgate. You don't get to do all of it. They have General Raiho, which is basically Murakumo, except it doesn't activate. So like they always have to keep discarding cards for their monster effects on the field to resolve. And that feels bad, always having to like get rid of your hand. But don't worry, because they've actually already solved this in Archetype by printing Spellbreaker of the Ice Barrier. That says once per turn, you send an Ice Barrier from your hand to the graveyard, so it doesn't even have to be a monster on field, it can be one of the ones from your hand. Neither player can activate spell cards until the end of your next turn while this is on the field as a 2000 defender. So what you can do is with this General Raiho, when your opponent has it up, you can get rid of the spell cards from your hand that you can't activate anyway. I'm being sarcastic. Let's point all these things to get these things so where they can't be played together. So obviously, I don't need to describe why Murakumo and Imperial Order are a problem. Here we have General Wayne. General Wayne is one of the ones I'm a little bit more okay with because it's just banishing the spells and traps that go from the field to the graveyard. And although a very funny floodgate against Paleo, I think this one's ultimately fine. You're losing some of those kinds of resources, and that's where I think banishing is okay, is when it's used as a, like, just losing access to resources rather than floodgating them. But here you can see this is another example of one of those cards that with the Tyrant's card, you just activate Imperial Order where your opponent can't actually activate any spell cards. Then we get to Georges. Georges says while you control another ice barrier, your opponent cannot activate the effects of monsters in the graveyard. I thought Abyss Dweller was a problem. I thought Abyss Dweller needed to be 100 points, but apparently Georgius is perfectly fine. Then we get to Medium. Medium sounds like it's okay. If your opponent controls 4 or more cards than you do, you can special summon it from your hand, and then your opponent can only activate 1 spell and trap card each turn. So obviously, it's trying to say that your opponent needs to be already established before you go ahead and summon this. However, you can summon it already. Like, you can cheat this card out. It doesn't have any summoning conditions that would stop you. So you can lock your opponent into, like, their 1 spell card or in their 1 trap card each turn. And so just these different kinds of floodgates, I just want to point them. If they want to point, like, each of them to be 25 for the ice barriers, so that way they maybe still get to play 1, like, well, maybe I could be okay with something like that. But the entire deck is floodgates, and I'm tired of those kinds of cards existing. And while we're at it, speaking of Abyss Dweller, Exosister is a little bit different of a deck, in my opinion. You have cards like Carmel that makes it so where, you're making your opponent's effect sort of become like what you want the deck to be able to do and trigger to go ahead and perform their XYZ summons. I think a move like that is interesting enough. You're not really negating, you're changing the effect. It plays around cards that are unaffected, which are really annoying to have to go against. And for those reasons, I like cards like Carmel. The problem is, once you've gone ahead and done that, you're triggering all of the Exosister names, which then allow them to perform their rank ups and activate their effects. And a card like Exosister Asophiel says, if this card is XYZ summoned using an Exosister monster as material, neither player can activate cards effects in the grave this turn. So at first, when this deck kind of first released, your opponent has to play into it, but now just at the cost of activating any card from trying to play the game, Carmel is going to be changing that effect so where you summon the Asophiel and then you Abyss Dweller your opponent for the turn, along with on top of activating the rest of the Exosisters and getting their effects. And I think that's where it takes it too far. I'm a fan of being able to activate my stuff in the graveyard, as you can tell from a lot of these different cards that I've listed out here. But I just don't think that these offer interesting means of gameplay, and so we really should be pointing them. Some additional archetypal cards that are floodgates that are still 0 points. We have cards like Diabel's Original Sin Keeper. A little bit harder to get out. I mean, it does have the effect where if Sinful Spoiled cards is in either player's graveyard, you can summon it from the hand. It is also a Diabel monster, so of course it's searchable. It does have the effect where a spell and trap needs to be set in order to be able to activate them. And I think this is much healthier than a card like Anti-Spell Fragrance. However, I do think that cards like this do present a problem. We don't have pendulums in the format, so I think for now this card probably is fine, but I did want to draw attention to it as a potential problem in the future. And overall, this card is fine to play through, so I think it's okay for now. Especially, I like the little mind game where you set one card, thinking if your opponent's going to try and pop it, and then you set another card in order to activate it, and playing that little bit of a mind game with your opponent, I think is interesting. So a little bit more okay with a card like this. However, a card I'm not okay with Naturia Bamboo Shoot. While you control this face-up card, tribute summoned by tributing a Naturia monster, your opponent cannot activate spell/trap cards. Once again, we are locking the opponent from being able to activate cards from their deck, and I think that's not okay. Obviously, you need to tribute summon it, so you need to maintain your normal summon or give yourself another one, and then tribute the Naturia monster specifically. But once this card has or has successfully been summoned to the field under this condition, you're locking your opponent out of their deck, and I don't think that's okay and should be pointed. Another one that I think is insane, Rose Whip. We banned it in advance because we knew it was going to be a problem with Cool Tune. And did we just forget to point it? Like, what happened here? This card's still 0 points. I think this card definitely should, be 100 points, maybe 50 points. Just keep it out of maybe a deck like Cool Tune. However, it is a plant tuner, and I believe is accessible through like some of the Rose Dragon combos because of their new support. So let's point this as well. Now, I bring up a lot of these cards because I think Genesys format is very similar in ways to Trinity format. And Trinity format, they've done a really good job of tackling a lot of these cards from, in my opinion, the proper way. You have a format philosophy. Floodgates, burn cards, and cards with very strong protection effects. Now, I don't think all of these cards need to be pointed from this list. I mean, yeah, you definitely have pendulums in here and links that just would never exist. I think cards like Cuban are perfectly fine, as you have to hit like a very specific die roll in order for it to take effect. I think Denkoseka is a floodgate and could be problematic, but overall, it's fine for now how it is. So I think that following something like Trinity does, where they have this philosophy of floodgates, burn cards, cards with strong protection effects, Genesys really needs to follow that same kind of ideology of, sticking to what they said. They pointed a bunch of floodgates in the beginning. Everybody was happy about those points. Let's go ahead and continue it up and just get rid of the rest of the problem cards. I think part of the problem with Trinity is they definitely their metagame balance, in my opinion, it could use some more reworking. Hitting Abominable Unchained Soul is insane to me, but overall, I think Genesys format is in a really good place. It just needs a little bit more work of cleaning up the rest of those floodgates. If I missed any, or if there's any that you specifically are hating to go up against online or in person, let me know in the comments section down below, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.